Hello, everyone. I call the meeting to order.
Meeting number 7 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Official Languages. La réunion de...
Today's meeting is being held in a hybrid format as per House Order adopted on Thursday, November 25th, 2021, and members will be present in person or via Zoom. The proceedings will be posted on the House of Commons website. For information, the webcast will always show the person who's speaking rather than the entire committee.
Ongoing pandemic situation and in light of the recommendations from health authorities, as well as the directive of the Board of Internal Economy on Monday, February 14th, 2022, to remain healthy and safe, all those attending the meeting in person are to maintain 2-meter physical distancing, must wear a non-medical mask when circulating in the room, and it is highly recommended that the mask be worn at all times, including when seated. And thirdly, must maintain proper hand hygiene by using the provided hand sanitizer in the room.
As chair, I will enforce these measures throughout the meeting, and I thank the members in advance for their cooperation. For those who are participating online, I would like to state some rules to follow. You may speak in the official language of your choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of the screen between the floor, so no interpretation, English or French. If interpretation services are interrupted, please let me know immediately, don't be shy, and we will make sure interpretation services can be properly restored before continuing. For members who are participating in person, please proceed as you normally would when the full committee meets in person in a meeting room. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you are participating via video conference, please click on the microphone icon to activate your microphone. For those of you who are in the room, your microphone will be checked as usual by the Procedures and Verification Order Officer. We remind you that all member comments must be directed to the chair. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly, and not like I do it when I forget myself. When you're not speaking, your microphone should be muted. With regards to the speakers list, the committee clerk and I will do our best to maintain a consolidated speaking order for all members, whether they are participating virtually or in person.
Any technical challenges arise, please advise me. Please note that we may need to suspend a few minutes as we need to ensure all members are able to participate fully. Donc, conformément à l'article 100...
Pursuant to Standing Order 1083F and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, January 31st, 2022, the committee is undertaking its study of government measures to protect and promote French in Quebec and in Canada. I would like to welcome our witnesses now. With us for the first hour of the meeting, joining us virtually. I'll come back to this first hour's comment. So for the first hour on video conference, from the Department of Canadian Heritage, Julie Boyer, Assistant Deputy Minister of Official Languages, Heritage and Regions, as well as Sarah Boily, Director General, Official Languages. From the Department of Citizenship and Immigration, Corinne Prince, Acting Assistant Deputy Minister, Settlement and Integration Sector, and Mr. Glenn Linder, Director General of International and Intergovernmental Relations. There will be a maximum of 5 minutes for speeches, and then we will move on to a round of questions. Dear guests, I will let you know when you have about 1 minute left. Before I go any further, to the witnesses, I need to speak with my colleagues who are around the table and around the Zoom screen. Because of the vote, we have lost a bit of time. We've lost almost 45 minutes. What I suggest is that we cut both of our parts of our meetings. The clerk is letting me know that the technicians and interpreters can continue for 2 hours. I know some of us have obligations after 5:30 in Ottawa time. Would you agree to extend 15 minutes beyond the end time, which would be 5:45? Please let me know, either with a gesture or nodding your head, so everyone's okay. So we will continue until... Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I'm in New Brunswick and I'm confused about the time. So we would continue 15 minutes after the end time. Is that correct, Mrs. Clerk? Mr. Chair, I'm so sorry to interfere. I asked to speak, but you couldn't see me from New Brunswick, which I understand. I'm happy to see you healthy on screen, Mr. Chair. Can you verify with all members if they would be able to extend for 30 minutes? Oh, that would be great. We could do the full 2-hour meeting. Before asking the question, I will go to Mr. Beaulieu, who has raised his hand. I wanted to make the same comment. I wanted to know if people were available to stay for the full 2 hours. I don't think so, but Madame Latendia, I can stay until 6. Mr. Chair, unfortunately, I will have to leave at 5:45 today. So if you still have quorum, that's great, but I can't stay. Out of respect for everyone, I think we will call it at 5:45. Mr. Chair. Yes, Mr. Godin? You hear a voice from above. After verifying something, I have the clerk in the room. If we have quorum, your colleague has suggested that if no one has the intention of proposing a motion, we could continue until 6, even if all members can't be present. But from the Conservative side, we can commit to not tabling a motion within the last 15 minutes of the meeting. Can I have unanimous consent on this proposal from Mr. Godin? We have unanimous consent. So no motions allowed after 5:45. Madam Clerk, is this a legitimate proposal? Is it acceptable? Yes, that's fine. I'm taking note of it. Great. So we'll do a full hour with our first round of witnesses. Let me find my document. One moment, please. I have 2 screens. Before I begin, do I still have everyone? Did I lose everyone? We hear you, Mr. Chair. We can see you also. We heard some bad words, Mr. Chair. Careful, we can hear you and see you. I used a word that's in the dictionary. Both dictionaries. So before saying I was here in person on Monday, and I found out Tuesday that I had been in touch with people who received a positive COVID test result. That's why I'm now back in New Brunswick. I have to isolate for 5 days. Just so you know, the people who were in the room on Monday, I have no symptoms. I haven't had any, and I've tested negative as lately as this morning. Joël was in the room, I think. I think you had members of your staff. Anyways, I just want to let you know that everything's fine so far. So our guests from Heritage Canada, you have the floor for 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Julie Boyer, and I will be speaking to you first. I would like to express my sincere thanks to you and to all members of the committee for your invitation, but especially for the work you do. The studies you are doing are important to Canadians in general and to federal public servants in particular. Your research and surveys serve as a guide for us in our policy development. My colleague, Sarah Boilly, and I are therefore delighted to have this opportunity to speak to you about the government's effort to protect and promote French in Canada. Indeed, since September 2020, from the speech from the throne, the government recognized that French is in a special situation, and we have a responsibility to protect and promote it not only in Canada, but also in Quebec.
In fact, Several initiatives are already underway to provide the government with important levers to take concrete action to protect and promote the French language from coast to coast to coast. The most recent action plan for official languages, 2018 to 2023, Investing in Our Future, was launched after extensive consultations with communities and partners in the sector. The plan represents an investment of $2.7 billion over 5 years, with $500 million of new funds intended to counter the decline in the demographic weight of Francophone communities across the country. This plan has enabled the government to make investments in key sectors essential for the vitality of Francophone communities in Canada, such as immigration, early childhood education, justice, health, and many others. Above all, it has made it possible to better fund initiatives to promote French, such as French immersion programs, a recruitment strategy for French teachers, French second language post-secondary scholarships, support for second language learning and minority language education through federal, provincial, and territorial agreements, better support for French language services in the territories, and the renewal of the collaboration agreement for the development of the arts and culture in Francophone minority communities. With 1 year to go, we have completed all of the initiatives included in this action plan for official languages, and we are about to begin consultations for the next action plan for 2023 to 2028.
In addition to these important investments, on April 19, 2021, the federal budget proposed to invest an additional $389.9 million over 3 years, starting in 2021-2022 in order to support official languages. Among other things, it proposes to Canadian Heritage $180.4 million to improve French immersion and French as a second language programs in schools and post-secondary institutions to help provinces and territories meet the high demand from students and parents for French immersion and French as a second language, and strengthen the existing strategy for recruiting and retaining teachers and supporting the learning of French from an early age. Another amount, $121.3 million to provide quality post-secondary education in the minority language across Canada. And finally, $81.8 million over 2 years to support the construction, renovation, and development of educational and community spaces that serve official language minority communities. These investments will further the protection and promotion of French in Canada and contribute to the vitality of official language minority communities. The department is working hard to reintroduce legislation to modernize the Official Languages Act and to implement the administrative, regulatory, and legislative proposals in the reform document entitled English and French Towards Substantive Equality of Official Languages in Canada, which was released in February.
Demonstrated its commitment to protecting and promoting French and will continue to do so by implementing the modernization of the Official Languages Act. Now I would be pleased to take your questions. Thank you.
Merci, Madame Boyer.
Thank you, Madame Boyer. You made it in 4 minutes and a half. That's wonderful. Now, from the Department of Citizenship and Immigration, Mr. Linder or Mrs. Prince, the floor is yours. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, for the opportunity to address you today. I would like to point out that I'm joining you from the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. With me is Corinne Prince, the Acting Assistant Deputy Minister of the Settlement and Integration Services sector. We are pleased to be with you to provide information on the Canada-Quebec Accord and Francophone immigration outside of Quebec. The IRCC is working closely with the Ministère de l'Immigration, de la Francisation et de l'Intégration, our counterpart in the Government of Quebec, while respecting the respective roles and responsibilities of both levels of government as defined in the 1991 Canada-Quebec Agreement. The principal objectives of the agreement are to maintain the Quebec's demographics weight within Canada and to integrate immigrants into Quebec in a manner that respects the province's distinct identity. Under the Canada-Quebec Accord, Quebec is the only province that publishes its immigration goals and targets annually. However, the Government of Canada is responsible for setting the total annual number of immigrants for the country as a whole, taking into account Quebec's views on the number of immigrants it wishes to receive in all categories. The agreement also gives Quebec other responsibilities, such as establishing its own selection criteria for economic immigrants, establishing and evaluating financial criteria for family class sponsorships, the selection of government-assisted and group-sponsored refugees, and the provision of reception and integration services in the province. In terms of federal responsibilities, the IRCC administers the Family Reunification Program as well as the Protected Persons in Canada program, which is for people who have been determined by the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada to be refugees in need of Canada's protection. The Government of Canada is also responsible for determining the admissibility of all applicants for immigration to Canada. The eligibility assessment includes health, security, and criminal background checks to determine if they meet the requirements of the legislation for admission to the country. I would like now to talk about Francophone immigration outside of Quebec. The federal government recognizes that immigration plays an important role in supporting the development of Francophone minority communities across the country. In March 2019, the IRCC launched the strategy called Achieving Our Goals, Francophone Immigration Strategy, outlining the government's vision for Francophone immigration while reaffirming the adoption of a target of 4.4% French-speaking immigrants outside of Quebec by 2023. Since then, the IRCC has undertaken numerous initiatives to reach its 4.4% target, including the allocation of additional points to Francophone and bilingual applicants under the Express Entry, a system used to manage applications for permanent residence for skilled workers outside of Quebec. The strategy has yielded positive results. The proportion of admissions has steadily increased from less than 2% in 2017 to 3.6% in 2020. However, pandemic-related restrictions, particularly border restrictions, have had a significant impact on immigration in general and have particularly affected Francophone immigration. Thus, the proportion of Francophone admissions for 2021 was 2%. In 2020 and 2021, in response to the pandemic, the department has implemented a number of measures to ensure that Canada remains a destination of choice for French-speaking immigrants, including a pathway from temporary residence to permanent residence. By the time this pathway closes on November 5th, closed on November 5th, 2021, the department had received more than 2,300 applicants in the two streams for Francophone essential workers and approximately 4,700 applications in the stream for recently graduated Francophone international students. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and we will be pleased to take your questions. Thank you, Mr. Linder. 4 minutes 55. Our witnesses are on the ball today. They're fired up, so to speak. So the first round of questions will come from each party, 6 minutes total, including question and response. The first question comes from our first vice chair, Mr. Joël Godin. You have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank the witnesses and the representatives from Canadian Heritage and Citizenship and Immigration. My first question is for Canadian Heritage. Mr. Chair, before I go any further, I would like to mention that we had invited the Minister of Canadian Heritage, but unfortunately, he did not respond to our invitation, and so we will be asking these questions to people who work in the department every day. Mrs. Boyer, you said that in the speech from the throne in 2020, we recognize the representation issue experienced by Francophones, or the decline of French, and this was recognized in the speech from the throne in 2020. You talked about a tactic from April 19th, 2021, where we invested over $100 million over 2 years. I would like to know, investments are all fine and well, but tell me this. You said we want to improve immersion programs. We want to help the provinces and territories. We want to reinforce things. What are the specific actions that were taken and what situations were rectified? You talked about the speech from the throne in 2020, and then you talked about a $389 million investment starting in April 2021. So what are the specific actions that were made to rectify this situation following the speech from the throne from 2020?
Merci beaucoup pour la question.
Thank you very much for this question. I'd like to start by saying that this is something that was mentioned in the speech from the throne in 2020, and it was also repeated in the speech from the throne in 2021. We're reacting to the trend, the backwards trend of French in Canada. So we had an action plan that contained many measures. In some cases, we just needed to increase funding. We didn't need to correct situations. Rather, we needed to increase funding in order to reach a greater number of students, for example, for French language education, more spaces in schools, more money to attract French language teachers. Madame Boyer, thank you. You know that our time is limited. That was very specific. What I understand is that the only problem that we had for French representation was the only solution was to invest more money. So that's to say that the tools and the programs in place work. We just needed more money. Is that what you're saying? I would say that yes.
Côté du ministère de l'Immigration. Les plaintes visant Immigration Canada sur les langues de réponse.
The language of response. There has been an explosion of complaints at the Office of the Commissioner of Official Languages. Mr. Linder. Thank you very much for the question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, we did take note of the complaints, and we're taking them seriously. We're aware of our duties and obligations according to the Official Languages Act, but we also know how important it is to offer services to our clients in the language of their choice. We investigate all cases that are brought to our attention. Well, Mr. Linder, I apologize for interrupting, but I have a simple question. Do you have a plan to correct the problem? You're talking about things that you look into, but do you have an action plan to correct the situation? Mr. Chairman, our plan is to investigate complaints. So every time there are thousands of transactions every day. We take things very seriously, and we investigate every time there is a complaint. We follow up, and every time we try to remediate any problem. Well, I have another question. We've learned that the messages of the government to Canadians in French are full of spelling mistakes. How can you explain this? And once again, have you implemented a program to deal with this problem? Thank you, Chairman. Once again, I personally don't have the information before you, but I can assure you that services and information on immigration, well, we're very well aware that this has to be available in both official languages. And it also has to be written in good French. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Godin. You had 2 seconds left. Next speaker, Mr. Iacono, for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, rather. I'd like to thank our witnesses for appearing. And I'll begin with Ms. Boilly. Can you tell us how the new version of the Official Languages Act could give better tools to the Official Languages Commissioner so he could deal more effectively with certain problems? I'm going to ask my colleague Sarah to deal with this, Sarah Boilly. Thank you, Chairman. Now, as to the question on the proposed legislation, in the document made public and in C-32, which was put forward in the spring, there was mention of giving the Language Commissioner 4 new powers. First of all, he'd be able to make public his investigations. He would also have the authority to come to agreements on conformity with other governments, the federal government. And the third power, the third authority, would be that he could issue orders. And you know that this is we see this in the federal court. So I gave you talked about 3 of the authorities or powers. The fourth, well, I've just forgotten it. But these are the 3 major powers that are in Bill C-32. Well, the promotion of French remains one of the department's main concerns. How can it make things more dynamic? Well, I can start, and then if my colleague wants to add something, she can. There are various metrics we use in deciding how well French is being protected and promoted. And the most important thing in C-32 is what concerns the private sector, because the federal government decided that the private sector had a role to play in promoting and protecting French. And in Bill C-32, we propose the Canadians should have the right to be served in both official languages, and not only in Quebec, but also in those areas with a significant French-speaking province. Now, this is one of the main measures. There are other things that have been proposed to lead to the enhancement of various sectors, and cultural and other. There's Telefilm Canada, museums, other things. This is another way we might go about strengthening French. And does your colleague have anything to say? I think Sarah said what needed to be said. Well, there's going to be $121 million available in 2021-22. How much of this money has been put to work, and and what provinces and territories are going to use this money to implement various plans and activities? Well, we work with the provinces and territories to transfer money so that they can be part of the action plan. We can provide this information to you once the work and the negotiations are over. Thank you. Chairman, how much time do I have left? You have 1 minute and 20 seconds. My next question is for Ms. Prince. The Department of Immigration paid $835 million to the province, to Quebec, to help newcomers. The structural fund was also to help francophones outside Quebec. Can you tell me what form this has taken or is taking? Of course. Thank you very much for the question. We have various tools at our disposal which begin with attracting newcomers to Canada. So we begin in the source countries, and when people are selected, we have various tools to help them get along the path to citizenship. Perhaps, Madam, you'll be able to add more information in another answer. I'm trying to be as polite as possible. I don't like interrupting. Next, our second Vice Chair, Mr. Beaulieu. Mr. Chairman, thank you. And my question is this one. When we look at public monies and we look at projects funded in Quebec, I'm thinking of projects that go to helping develop the Anglophone community. Is this still the case? Well, I'll take that question. If I've understood properly, you want to know if this helps francophones in Quebec. Well, there are the programs of Heritage Canada, where Quebec francophones are really promoted and supported. But within the framework of official languages, does it go to Anglophones? Well, no, not necessarily. I'll give you an example. There is an association that works with various governments, including the government of Quebec, which works on projects that help and promote the French-speaking community in Quebec. But there are projects which go to the Chamber of Commerce of Quebec. And what does this look like? And does there exist a list where we can get some of the details on where the funding goes? Well, yes, you can look at the details of plans where there is a direct financing in Quebec. Thank you. My next question has to do with immigration. Now, last December, we saw that there was a refusal rate in giving temporary permits to francophones from countries like Guinea, Congo, Benin, and others. It also affected people in Franco-Ontarian institutions. And I saw problems myself in my own writing. So what's being done at Immigration Canada? There is the Chinook program. But how can you explain this? Because officially, the government is trying to increase the Francophone population, but it seems that they're doing the opposite. Thank you, Chairman. With respect to the approval rate between Francophone and Anglophone candidates, there is a gap between the two, but it's really minimal. For Francophones, the approval rate, or rather for Anglophone students, one was a little more than 20% and the other was 20%. The year before that had been the opposite. That year, the rate of French-speaking students, the rate of approval of French-speaking students was higher. We do have information on applications, and we're conscious of how important it is for students, the student population, not only at our universities, and we know how important this is for the future. Well, basically, you're saying what was heard in the media was not true, because we're talking about a 90% refusal rate for students from the Congo, 87% for Cameroon, 87% for Algeria, 88% for Benin, for Senegal. Are you saying that these numbers are wrong? No. What I'm saying is usually, if you look at all these countries and the Francophone students versus the Anglophone students from these countries, there is a minimal difference. But the countries I named are basically French-speaking nations. The minister talked about a possible study. Is there a study underway to look into this phenomenon? Mr. Chairman, we have been studying this quite closely. We want to look at the approval rate for students, particularly from Africa. It is something we've been looking at. And there are initiatives to promote African students. Thank you, Mr. Linder. You'll be able to perhaps say more when you answer another question.
Last question, I presume, is in replacement of Mrs. Ashton. So, first time here, Mrs. McPherson. Bienvenue au Comité des langues officielles. Et à vous la parole for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much.
You have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Able to join you again.
I'm happy to be able to join you.
You will know. I'm getting, unfortunately, interpretation in both sides, so maybe I'll just double check that that's working. As many of you will know, I'm from Edmonton, and Edmonton Strathcona, of course, is the home to Campus Saint-Jean. It is the heart of a very thriving Franco-Albertan community. So I'm happy to be here and be able to ask some questions of you. And some of the first questions that I have are around the immigration and the IRCC issues that we've been hearing about today. And I know that the witnesses talked about the idea that they are looking into it, that there's research being done, but I think it's very, very clear that we have a problem here. Francophone communities are very clear. They know very well that immigration is critical to maintaining their demographic weight and protecting their access to critical services. And they rely on the IRCC to work with them for their very survival. The department has neglected Francophone minority communities. The government's target of 4.4% of Francophone immigration established 20 years ago has never been reached. The Francophone communities need to go beyond aiming for the same targets, but rather to correct the situation. You know, we need to go further because we have failed to meet that 4.4 target. The government has failed to meet that 4.4% target. We need more ambitious targets. We need to recognize how important it is that we make up for the failure to meet those targets in the past. What is the department willing to do? Will they be willing to listen to the communities? Will they set new targets to correct these decades of failure? And what are those concrete steps? I'd like just some very, very concrete steps on what will be done to ensure that the new targets are actually reached, not just put forward. Thank you.
Monsieur le Président, merci beaucoup pour la question.
Thank you for the question.
For your question about our 4.4% target, which is our target for 2023. I can tell you that IRCC has advanced in a number of ways over the past several years to work much more closely with the Francophone minority communities outside of Quebec. We have increased the number of Francophone service providers outside of Quebec from 50 to 80 last year. In investing many more millions of dollars in Francophone services. Just a few weeks ago, our Minister Fraser, added 9 additional resettlement agencies to assist with the incoming Afghan refugees. And we doubled the number of Francophone resettlement agencies in that announcement, adding agencies in Bathurst and Edmonton, as well as in Grand Prairie and Fort McMurray. So in your province. In addition, in order to meet the target, we put in place a TR to PR pathway initiative last year with no caps on the Francophone applicants, with a view to increasing the number of international students here in Canada who could apply for permanent residency. That there were more than 7,000 applications for that initiative, and we hope that will go a far way to increase the number of landings to address the 4.4% target. I must say, however, Madame McPherson, that we are in a pandemic, and the pandemic has, in fact, been quite an issue, not only for Francophone newcomers, but for all newcomers to the country, with borders closed and the continuing pandemic. It has affected the number of newcomers to our country.
Of course, yeah. With all due respect, though, I mean, this was something that was set in place in many years before the pandemic, and that target has never been met. So, you know, with all due respect, as much as our lives have all been turned on their head during COVID-19, I think that this is very clearly an indication that the target of 4.4 needs to be more ambitious, and there needs to be more done to make sure that that can be reached. And so I'm glad that you were able to share some of those concrete things. I certainly hope that is sufficient to get to where I think we all need to get to and want to get to. In terms of the Francophone immigration outside of Quebec section of the report that was tabled in Parliament yesterday, the data for 2021 is missing. Can you tell us what the percentage of landed Francophone immigrants outside Quebec is in 2021?
Monsieur le Président,
Madame
McPherson, I do have data in front of me between January and October of 2021, and that is approximately 2% of all admissions were Francophone admissions. Just the year before, it was almost 4%. So as you can see, the pandemic has had a very large influence on that. I will say, though, that economic...
Merci, Madame Prince.
Thank you, Mrs. Prince.
So we have to go to cut this meeting in 2 equal parts. We have to go until 5 o'clock Ottawa time. Sorry. Donc, ce que je vais faire,
So what I'll do is I'll allow 2 3-minute questions and 2 1-minute questions for the Bloc and the NDP, which will bring us to 5 p.m. Mr. Dalton for 3 minutes. Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, my apologies. I think we can take more time. If we go to 5:05, we can share the 2 blocks 50-50. Maybe you can check with Madam Clerk. We can take more time.
De moitié-moitié, c'est-à-dire...
Do you mean 2 minutes and a half each? Mr. Chair, if we go to 4 minutes, 4 minutes, 4 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, then we fit within the time. You're correct, but last time I was told that that was not in compliance. It's 5 minutes for the governments and 2.5 minutes for the minority parties. Mr. Chair, my apologies. That's not exactly what we said last time. We said that we had to respect representation of the parties in the House. So you had given equal time to all 4 parties, and Mr. Serré and I had asked you to give us 2 minutes and to give 1 minute to the other parties. So what I'm proposing is 4 minutes for the Conservatives and the Liberals and 2 for the NDP and the Bloc, and that way we respect representation. Do all members agree? Raise your hand if okay. So we are going to move on quickly. So 4 minutes and 2 minutes. Is that what I understood? Correct. Great. Mr. Dalton, go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the witnesses. I would like to talk about immersion. This is such a great opportunity to promote French outside of Quebec, and there is more demand than what we can accommodate. We talked about $180.4 million over 5 years, but when you divide it, it's not really that much. I'm a member for BC, and if I do my math, I can see that it pays for 3 dozen teachers each year, and demand is far greater than that. So maybe, Mrs. Boyer, can you tell us how the money is spent on French immersion? Can you tell us more about that? And can you tell us about training teachers? And can you do it in 45 seconds? Because I have another question. Yes, I'll speak fast. That amount goes to increasing spaces in French immersion programs, but also for FSL, French as a Second Language programs. It also is spent on French programs for early childhood education so that we can have a full education continuum. We're also looking to increase the number of teachers that we can recruit and attract in these provinces. Thank you. I would like to say that it's not enough. I know that it's not coming out of your own pocket, but we need more investments. It's coming out of all of our pockets. Exactly. Very good political answer. When Mélanie Joly left Heritage, she kept the official languages portfolio, and this is now in the hands of Mrs. Petitpas. So now there is a fragmentation of responsibilities. What are the responsibilities of the Heritage Minister compared to the Minister of Official Languages? I think this is really a question about the inner workings of the government, but I'll say that according to the law, the Minister for Heritage is responsible, but it's delegated to the Minister of Official Languages. So Minister Petitpas-Taylor is responsible for official languages. And I would like to reassure you, within the department, there have been no changes. People who were working on official languages before this role was delegated to Minister Petitpas-Taylor are still occupying these roles and doing the same job. We talked about admissions in the media. 1.8 million files are still waiting to be treated because of the pandemic, processed. According to how many of these are potential Francophone immigrants? Mr. Linder, can you answer that question? Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's true we have an important file backlog, but unfortunately I don't have the exact number for Francophone immigrants within those files. Can you follow up with us? Can you send us this information? Is my time up? Yes, thank you, Mr. Dalton. Our next speaker will be Mr. Drouin. You have 4 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank the witnesses who are appearing before us today. My questions are for Heritage Canada. We'll have the opportunity to question immigration at a later session. I would like to talk about the definition of success for Heritage Canada, specifically for official languages. And let's talk about positive measures. When we fund a program or an event, a festival, for example, we can say this is good for the French community. But I'd like to know how we measure the impact of a given success within Heritage Canada. I will be pleased to answer that question. When we support official languages program, we have funding for events. Every time we grant funds, we set out clear objectives, participants, and other impacts, and they are measured and written within each agreement that we have with our partners. So that's one way. But if we go back to the Official Languages Action Plan, I wasn't able to elaborate earlier on one of these questions, but one ways that we know that we've succeeded and that we're on the right track is that we have a midterm evaluation. Stakeholders and organizations said that they were satisfied at a rate of 85%. They were satisfied by participation and the implementation of the programs that were included. So I wanted to say that we are on the right track with regards to results. Great. For me, I would say that's fantastic. You're funding programs and events in my area. There were 60% Francophones in my area, but in the past we were 66%. So yes, you funded events, and I imagine you're limited by the current law. We often talk about one positive measure compared to many positive measures. So I'd like to know if you're talking about this with your counterparts, maybe with Immigration Canada. Do they also have to meet targets? My community is losing Francophones every year despite your department's best intentions. So how can we create legislation that will make sure there's better coordination within the federal government? What an excellent question. What's fantastic about the official languages file is that it's a horizontal file. It's everyone's responsibility. It involves more than just Heritage Canada. It includes my colleagues from Immigration and Citizenship Canada. We work very close on implementing the measures from the action plan, and we're also working on the Official Languages Act modernization project. So we are collaborating regularly at a high level on multiple files. And we're going to keep doing that and moving forward. Thank you for your question. 40 seconds. You have 40 seconds? Sorry, Mr. Chair, you say 40 seconds? I will give my time away. There's no time for a question. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Drouin. Next question. Monsieur Beaulieu, you have 2 minutes. First question for Heritage Canada. In C32, were there any parts that spoke to distributing funds in different parts of Quebec to promote French? Thank you very much for the question. That kind of distribution is usually negotiated in the MOU with each province. So this is not something that we legislate, but it's agreed upon with the provinces. But if we look at funding overall, is this part of the Canada-Quebec agreement, or are these funds that go directly to organizations? Normally, the funds are granted to organizations, and they are granted through our official languages support program. So the Canada-Quebec agreement is for education and services, correct? Yes. Earlier, you said that you can share more details with us about funding to Quebec. Can you follow up with that? Yes, we can add it to our list of follow-ups. Can we contact you to get this information, or will you send it to us? I will send it through the clerk. It would be my pleasure. Thank you very much. Next question. This question is for citizenship and immigration. Earlier, you said that there could be a high rate of refusal for Francophone African country applicants. But this raises a question. You have 5 seconds, Mr. Beaulieu. We'd like to know why people are rejected. I don't have a chance to ask it in 5 seconds, but nope. I'm sorry, Mr. Beaulieu.
For Mrs. McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In January, the Federal Court of Appeal found that the federal government failed in its obligations set out in Part 7 of the Official Language Acts to take positive measures to promote the vitality of the Francophone minority in British Columbia. Of course, everyone here knows that this was the second such ruling in just over a year. In Alberta, we've seen the provincial government fail to protect French in Alberta. It's reneged on its contractual obligations to fund Campus Saint-Jean, and to date has refused to accept the federal dollars to make up for part of that funding gap. Without Campus Saint-Jean, Alberta will not have the qualified teachers it needs to serve its Francophone students, or those who, like my daughter, are enrolled in bilingual programs. How can the federal government bypass or otherwise compel provincial governments like the Alberta's United Conservative government to protect minority language rights?
So I will start, and perhaps Sarah can complete my answer.
Thank you.
I would say there are some projects underway, and we do have regular conversations with officials from other provinces and territories on what are their needs for post-secondary education. We have an upcoming event that will be organized to look at issues around post-secondary education in the language of minority, to see what are some of the issues underlying the systemic recurring problems with Francophone universities outside of Quebec, to see if we can find solutions to address those. I don't know, Sarah, did you want to add to that?
The only thing that I would add is that as part of the investments, the $120 million to support post-secondary, there is part of that envelope that is targeting community organizations that are so that they can network and better identify the needs for post-secondary. So there is that availability.
Thank you, Mrs. Boilly. I'm so sorry. Boyer, sorry. This was very interesting today. If you believe that there's information that you were not able to send to us because of a lack of time, please do not hesitate to send it through the clerk. She will share it to all members of the committee. With this, we will take a quick break in order to set up the second panel. So we are back for the second half. Today, participating over Zoom are the Centre Communautaire Francophone de Sarnia-Lambton. Tania Temilio, the president, is here. Mouvement Québec Français is represented by Maxime Laporte, president, and the Société Saint-Jean-Baptiste de Montréal, represented by Marianne Alpin, general president. So you have 5 minutes to present yourselves and to tell us what you'd like to tell us. I will let you know when there's about a minute left. And with that, we will move to Temilio for 5 minutes.
Très bien.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Tania Temilio. I'm the director of a Francophone Center in Sarnia. We deal with Francophones in Sarnia-Lambton. We are the door, the entryway into the French-speaking community in our area. We also try to get people together. Thank you for your invitation in order to speak to government measures to protect French in Canada and Quebec. I'd like to tell you about the reality of the French language in small towns. And I have some ideas on what the government might do in order to help promote the vitality of the French language. First of all, Sarnia-Lambton is a small industrial city that is on the border with the United States. There are more than 5,000 Francophones and Francophiles. There are 5 French language schools, 5 immersion schools, and there are nonprofit groups who work at increasing services in French. This is a vibrant French-speaking community who have leaders who militate for them. Sarnia-Lambton was designated a French-speaking area, and we work at the thriving and flourishing at our community. We work hard for our community, a community where Francophones want to be able to communicate in the language of their choice. We wouldn't have been designated a Francophone area without the help of Marilyn Gladue. I'd also like to underscore the help of Carolyn Mulroney and her team. It's essential what they did was essential, and I thank them. Now it's a question of services in the field of health. What can the federal government do? What can it do in regions like mine? I want you to invest in this sort of thing. Now, we have been dealing with the French language in small towns, but if all the money goes there, it will force us backwards. The reality is that there is a shortage of French teachers, French language teachers. The quality of services in French has to do with the training of young people to teach it. I have discussed things with the superintendent of schools. Now, their council does not have the resources necessary to help train people to teach French, and there are no pedagogical or teaching resources. Social workers don't speak French. How can we get the school board to agree that it's not important just to learn French, but to be able to flourish in French? This is one of our main issues. Now, usually speaking French is in the mandate of local community groups. The federal government has its subsidies for basic needs. $30,000 a year we get in order to promote the vitality of French in a town where French speakers are a minority. In order that the French language really thrive, we have to make sure that young children and other children have the ability to live in French. So Heritage Canada, you heard this earlier, they have projects, but the projects lost their time and then we're in the hole again. We know that the help of Immigration Canada is important. I think that it's necessary for children to choose one language and not both. So that's, I'll end there. Thank you. You'll be able to add more as you answer questions. Talk about your projects and French speakers in Sarnia. Our next witness is Maxime Laporte. Maxime, Mouvement pour un Québec français. We can't hear you, Mr. Laporte. In 1981, in 1971, this was the level of French speakers. It fell from 25.7 to 20.57. And now, so we're saying that in 2036 it will fall even further. The French-speaking glacier in Quebec has melted this much. It is 4.3% in 97, and it continues to drop. The net anglicization of Francophones in Canada went from 4.8% to 5.8% in 2016. And also we see 27.4% moves to 40.1% anglicization. In Quebec, the working language went from 83.1% in 2001, 80.6%, and then 70.6% in 2016. The island of Montreal went from 56%, and 15 years later, in 2016, it fell even more. In 1971, Quebec's demographic weight fell to 22.9 and then further, and will fall further. Quebec contains most French speakers in North America, but I feel French is on its way to being to extinction. Now, People have talked about a cultural genocide. There have been various inflammatory formulas, but Lord Durham's program is coming into effect. We former Canadians, because Quebecers were former Canadians, we're being more and more put into a minority question. The killer question is, what can we do? I don't really believe in certain measures. You'll say, what can we do, hypothetically? Well, hypothetically, we could make French the only true official language in Quebec and elsewhere where there is a significant proportion of francophones. But you won't do that. So we have to break with official bilingualism, Canadian style. We could look at Switzerland and have that as a model. We want the only language of Quebec to be French. So we want things to be changed accordingly, but we know you won't do this. We also want it to be the language of communications on its territory. We want it to be the language of anyone who wants to become a citizen of Quebec, and the language of education. Canada should no longer be able to invoke its spending power to hurt French. There's this kind of language segregation which gives English in Quebec an absolutely privileged position. And also, we know that anti-Bill 101 lobbies are financed generously every year. We think that francophones outside Quebec should have the same privileges as Anglophones in Quebec. In fact, we're going to have to start with a blank slate, start from zero. And what remains? Well, in the present state of play, if Canada cared as much about French as about national unity, we'd be in a great situation. What I recommend is divorce, and that's really all I have to say. I don't want to waste your time. It's been quite a while that Quebec and Canada really don't have anything to talk about anymore. So for the love of French, let's not waste our time and our money. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Laporte. I will now give the here from Ms. Marianne Alpin. Thank you for 5 minutes. There we are. Good afternoon, and allow me to thank you for having invited me and for your interest in the promotion of the French language. I represent the Saint-Jean-Baptiste Society of Montreal, and in its defense of the French language and in democracy. This society was part of all questions, all issues in the 19th and 20th century. Mr. Lepage talked before this committee. He talked about the assassination of Louis Riel in 1895, the abolition of French schools in Saskatchewan, school rights only grudgingly granted, and all the legislation passed by Anglophones, and then the absence of money for us to have French schools. When I think about Quebec, with the Anglophone school network, one can only get angry. The Saint-Jean-Baptiste Society, which they have the honor of leading, has been promoting the French language for 190 years, as well as Quebec culture and identity, besides national holidays and patriotic holidays. We award prizes in literature and in the other arts. The French language is a treasure in North America. We pass it on with passion, with energy. It is a rich, original culture, which is a jewel in world cultural diversity, but it is threatened. If only in Montreal itself, it's not just statistics that tell us this. We can see it. Our businesses, our television stations, radio stations bombard us with English. So there are places in Montreal where you cannot be served in French. English is taught intensively in grade school, and this creates vectors of Anglicization. Now, according to census, fewer people claim French in census reports as their language of work. We're heading towards being a minority in Quebec. Now, we still consider ourselves a country, but we don't have the authority to take things in hand and to strike a balance that will ensure that French continues on. Ottawa is interfering in our jurisdictions, has been injecting billions into education and health. For Anglophones, the Official Languages Act has created a fictive balance between Anglophones in Quebec and Francophones outside. Now, this money is being used in Quebec to promote English, whereas French is threatened. Anglo-Quebecers are an extension of the English majority, but on Quebec territory. We know that there has to be support for French-speaking communities outside Quebec. And in Quebec, the Official Languages Act is part of the problem. It's not part of the solution. You weren't there when this bill was passed, but today you can change things. My question is, do you want to continue Lord Durham's enterprise? Do you want English to be the dominant language, or do you want to turn this around and make sure that French continues to thrive? We have a country, and we propose three things: that money be spent massively to protect and promote the French language and culture outside Quebec, but also in Quebec. And we want the committee to propose, again, greater protection for French communications and the internet. Now, Quebec has acted in exemplary fashion with its Anglophone communities. Thank you, Ms. Alpin. I hope that later you'll be able to add more information when you answer questions. So, first round of questions will be questions of 6 minutes for each of the political parties. I'll begin with Mr. Gould for 6 minutes. Sir, you have the floor. Thank you, Chairman. And thank you to all witnesses. My first question has to do with teaching of French in immersion courses and trying to train teachers, because there is such a blatant shortage of French language teachers. Now, I understand that it's difficult to find French language teachers outside Quebec. Thank you for your question. I'm just a girl from Sarnia with a community group, but I can say there are people from Quebec who want to come to Sarnia. Once they're in Sarnia, the world outside the school is an English-speaking world. So we want to support French, but how can we support these people? You were talking about the Canadian Radio Television Commission. Now, there are English courses for Francophones who come from Quebec. You talked about immigration. I heard the gentleman speak earlier about this, and it would be wonderful if we could bump up the number of immigrants who are French-speaking, professionals, especially teachers, and bring them to the regions. Thank you. My next question is for Mr. Do you have any idea of how many immigrant Francophones want to settle in Quebec every year? Well, we've always said it in our society, the Saint Jean-Baptiste Society. I think what is essential and most important is that people speak French. Mr. Laporte? He's not there. Mr. Laporte left. So we have two witnesses, Madame Taliot and Ms. Albin. Ms. Tamilo, I know it's hard for you to find French language teachers, but how many do you need? Can you give me an idea of the extent of the problem? Well, I can talk about immersion schools, but we also have French language schools where we have teachers who are not qualified, who have full-time positions. They may speak French, but they're not really qualified. Now, we can't even replace people or find substitutes. Ms. Alpin, I have a strange question, but in my region, in the greater Quebec City region, I believe we're the only region in Canada, if not in North America, where Anglophones are assimilated. We have over 90% of the people are Francophones. So there are Anglophones who are assimilated, quite strange. But the birth rate among Francophones isn't enough to maintain a certain ratio. Do you think increasing the birth rate would be a good idea? Well, I'm not a demographer, but I think you have to make sure that, I don't know how you get people to have more children.
Immigration is a key element. Of course, if we could attract more immigration and control it better, if we could attract more Francophones, that would be an essential element. It's not ideal, but it's essential. We wrote in a memoir that we tabled for Bill 96 that people who had obtained their permanent residency didn't understand French. In Quebec, a high proportion doesn't speak French. My former president, Maxime Laporte, also gave you some alarming figures. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In closing, I think you were on, you had some good momentum there. I would say that in Montreal it's difficult. There are many Anglophones, but there are other languages spoken too. My daughter lives in Montreal right now, and she sees a big difference living in Montreal compared to living in Quebec City area. Anyways, I wish you the best of luck. Even if Quebec were to become one day a country, the critical mass in Montreal is still there, and I don't know how you see the future on that front. Is that a question? You have 10 seconds. Well, you know, we're a minority culture. We're in an ocean of English culture and language. Ideally, we would continue to fight and also transmit our passion to our children. Thank you.
Oh, pardon, j'étais pas sur le micro.
I'm so sorry. My microphone was off. I'm sorry for interrupting you. Next speaker is Patricia Latenzio. You have 6 minutes. The floor is yours. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will address my questions to Mrs. Tamilio. Very interesting. I saw an article that was published in The Observer that said that you recently reached a certain status. Can you tell us more about what your status gives you? Thank you for this question. So in 2018, earlier I said increasing human resources capacity. So we had volunteers that went to go speak to all elected officials, municipally, provincially, and federally. Not that we had much work to do with Madame Gladu. She was already on board, knowing that it's important for us in our region. From there, we went into Francophone organizations in the area. Again, this is a small area. There are only 6 Francophone organizations that provide activities or services to the French-speaking community in the area. I'm not talking about federal programs here. I'm just talking about outreach with about mental health outreach that in French that we don't have here in Sarnia. So these community organizations offer that type of services. So in 2018, we made the request. What kind of request was it? Did you ask for status at the municipal level? Yes, that's correct. At the time, we spoke to Kelly Kelt, I think. So we addressed our request to her, but we spoke to all elected officials. We had their support. Mrs. Latenzio, in Ontario, there is a group that is called the Francophonie Assembly of Ontario. We consult with them before we do anything. So we consulted with them, we had support, and we wanted to make sure not to miss anything. I'm so sorry. When you say that when you were talking about services and being able to access services in the French language, can you give us an example of the types of services that were not available in French for your minority community? Currently, we have nothing. It will start in 2024. It's the smallest things. Say you're a newcomer, you arrive in Sarnia, you don't speak English, you speak only French, and you're in the country. You have to go get your driver's license. You have to change your driver's permit. That's controlled by the province. No one can understand them. You can't even convert your license if you don't speak English. So it's small things like this that affect us every day. So slowly but surely, with our new designation, we can start seeing change. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So what about medical services? How does that go down in your area? Currently, there is no medical service that's available in French other than using an interpretation service. So if you go to the hospital, you can even ask for Mandarin and you will get access to a telephone interpretation service. So before getting our designation, we were working with the CEO, who's a Francophone, and we asked him if it was possible to consult to see if there are some people who speak French among those people. So there are some graduates of French immersion, some people who studied elsewhere that came back and speak French. So are there any people in the ultrasound department that speaks French, or other departments, do they speak French? And anyone who speaks French could wear a button. And that way, when Francophone people come to the hospital, they can see when they see a Francophone. But ultimately, it's a matter of money. So let's go from healthcare to education. In your opening remarks, you said that there are 4 schools and 5 immersion schools. So are these 4 schools, elementary school, high school? What are the schooling levels and how does that look Do you have bilingual programs? Do you have immersion programs? Do you have unilingual programs? Tell me more about the schooling in your area. So we have 2 Francophone elementary schools. Just like in Quebec, you just go to school in French for the full day. Maybe you have 1 English class, but everything that is taught is in French. And we have 2 French high schools as well. So all education happens in French there too. Then there are immersion schools. So 5 immersion schools. If I'm not mistaken, it's 4 elementary immersion program schools and 1 high school immersion school. And now you're saying that you have a teaching shortage. That said, you have all of these schools, elementary and high school. Do you have staffing issues in those schools? Yes, ma'am. So who's teaching French in those schools? Often we look for francophones, francophone parents that speak English, that speak French, or other professionals. Thank you, Mrs. Tamilio. I have to interrupt you. The next person on the line is our second vice president, Mr. Beaulieu. You have 6 minutes. My first question is for Mrs. Alapin. You gave us some numbers that are illustrating how French is moving backwards in Canada and in Quebec. In Quebec, of course, it's mostly a problem in Montreal. Can you tell us more about what Anglicization of Montreal looks like in the field? First, I would like to tell you that if we want to guarantee a future for French in Quebec, we need to make sure that newcomers speak French. This is just simple math. To get there, Quebec's government is working hard to make sure that French is the official language. This is the work that the government is doing. It's normal that newcomers seek to integrate to the majority, even if Francophones are in a majority in Quebec. They're a minority in Canada and in North America, and this leads to confusion. That's why, with Bill 101, the government of Quebec has tried to make French the only official language while respecting the historical rights of Anglophone communities. But of course, it's also still subject to the federal government that's elected by the English majority. And then we have a constitution that includes official languages that also wants to make space for English in Quebec. So the federal policies want to make sure that Anglophones can have access to service in English. That's fine. But if people want to use English in the public space, the federal government is there to protect that right. But we can really feel the erosion of French in Montreal. We did an investigation with the Journal de Montréal and found it very frustrating to find that every other time service was only offered in English. So 1 out of every 2 times you interact with someone in Montreal, they can't offer you service in French. It's alarming. Great. Okay, so French is far from being the lingua franca in Montreal. And let's not forget that the language of communication is something. We're talking about the language that's being spoken at home, the maternal language. So now there's like a language transfer that's happening. Excellent. My next question. I'm so sorry. I'm losing my train of thought. The other witness from Sarnia, she talked about territoriality. The expert who talked to us about this said that in Quebec, we're striving to make French the common language on that territory. But in areas outside of Quebec where there's a critical mass of French speakers, the federal government could try to make sure that services be predominantly offered in French at the very least. But that doesn't address the issue of areas where there's a small minority that won't have access to French services. I think they should have access to compensation from the government, because there are laws that had historically prevented the people from using French a little bit all over the place. So we need to make sure that there are more services offered in French, and to remove that criteria that there be a minimum threshold to offer that. And I'd like to know Mrs. Tamilio's point of view. Yes, thank you for clarifying. That's what I'd understood, is that we should be investing more in Francophone communities. For example, Toronto has a critical mass, but it's 2 hours from here, so it's not next door. So, yes, what I'm trying to say is that it's important that you always have French services available in your region. I think it's admirable what you're doing, because you're fighting under difficult circumstances. When we look at the rest of Canada, it's difficult for Francophones to access French services or French language education. How can we explain this? Is there Francophobia in Canada at large? What do you think? Well, there's a process that was started such a long time ago, and I would say that the assimilation machine is still chugging along. I wouldn't necessarily call it Francophobia, but the Official Languages Act is not necessarily going to help us when we think about the minority. The Act is helping minorities, but the language here in Quebec is not considered a minority. But Quebec is still within Canada. So it's like there's a double standard. It's ambiguous. We can't be considered as, I'm so sorry, your time is up. We'll continue later.
McPherson, 6 minutes for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses. This is very, very interesting. As I mentioned in the last panel, I represent a community in Alberta that has a very high percentage of Francophone speakers, and so I see this is vital for ensuring French happens across the country. Is that we are supporting it in communities like Edmonton, Strathcona, and communities outside of Quebec. The question I have first, if I could, is for you, Ms. Tamarillo. The vitality of French in my province of Alberta relies on new Canadians. Alberta is fortunate to have good immigration now from Francophone Africa, but these new Canadians face more than just language discrimination. They are also facing racism in our communities. How would you like to see the government support new Canadians from the continent of Africa as they deal with racism? What should Heritage Canada do? What should IRCC do to support these individuals who are so vital for French to exist in a minority setting like Edmonton, Strathcona?
Thank you for the question. Right now, in place, there's actually Patrimoine Canadien and ERCC do have programs for anti-racism programs. In Sarnia, and I happen to be so lucky to be able to sit on this, the Lambton College is our local college, accepts approximately 1,600 international students per year. They're working on a retention of a potential 400 of those students in our area. Now, we're here to speak about French. There's very few of those students that speak French. I've already gone and asked and begged if there was anybody in there that spoke French, but there's the majority of them are coming from India. Okay. So we are launching strategies to, one, welcome and retain those, but that's specific to our area, but that's with some of the funding that's offered from the federal government that's out there.
Thank you. Well, and from my perspective too, I mean, one of the key draws for Francophone speakers from Africa is Campus Saint Jean. It is our university that we have as a draw for that immigration, and the fact that is no longer. We cannot agree with our provincial government. Our provincial government, my colleague from the Bloc brought up Francophobia, and I would just say, if not Francophobia, our provincial government is certainly non-cooperative and does not see the value in protecting or fighting for our Francophone Albertans. My next question, I guess, is a little bit on the Commissioner for Official Languages, or the government's targets. We heard from the Commissioner of Official Languages that the federal government missed its 4.4% target for Francophone immigration outside of Quebec. It's never made that 4.4 target since it was set in 2003. Is this a realistic and sufficient target to maintain and allow progression for the demographic weight of the Francophonie in our communities? And again, I would open it up to both of our witnesses, but perhaps Ms. Tamillo, we could start with you. And I believe that our friend from the Bloc is not muted. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Indeed, your 4.4% has not shown an impact in our area. And we do need to, I do sit on another board, which is le Réseau d'immigration francophone pour le Centre-Sud-Ouest. Et puis, est-ce que c'est correct si je vais de l'avant?
Is it okay if I switch languages?
Oui, thank you. Donc,
the reality in that group is that we have to increase the level of Francophone immigration. One of the issues that we're experiencing is that when newcomers arrive through Toronto, they arrive in Pearson in Ontario, they are offered places to live. They'll go directly where Anglo services are available, so they're not directed correctly. IRCC has noticed this. They've put up kiosks with Francophones, but there aren't Francophones there at post at full time. So their first welcome is with an Anglophone. And once they speak to that person, they get sent to a region that is directed by an Anglophone. So to answer your question, the 4.4% needs to increase, not just in my area, but overall in Canada. And if I may, I'll speed up a little bit. But in the Sarnia area, we have immigration services. People arrive here, and if they don't speak French or English, they're only allowed to choose one language to learn. But when you arrive in a place like Sarnia, you can't just learn French because you'll get lost. You won't even be able to get a passport. So then people automatically choose to learn English. But then from there, if they want to learn French, they have to pay. So that's something that you might want to take note of. Let's offer them language education in both official languages for free.
Add very quickly.
15 seconds.
Madame Alpin, anything you'd like to add?
Merci beaucoup, Madame McPherson. Merci beaucoup, Madame McPherson, Madame Alpin. Oui, mais c'est tout le temps qu'on a pour l'instant. La prochaine ronde de questions, je vais commencer avec pour le...
With the next round of questions, I'll start with the official opposition, 3 minutes each. And then a minute and a half for the second opposition parties. I know that this is something we could talk about forever, but we are limited with our time. Perchance, the first person who will take the floor is from Sarnia-Lambton. Madame Gladue, you have the floor for 3 minutes. Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks to the witnesses. My first question is for Mrs. Tamilio. I'm so pleased to see you. And thank you for the work you do to increase Francophonie in our community. What do you have to say for other smaller communities that would like to get more services and French presence in their area? Excellent question. My suggestion, and this is a shortage here, is to increase the pool of workers by increasing education in French from early childhood education to post-secondary education. We'd also need to welcome newcomers well. We are modernizing the Official Languages Act. To both witnesses, what can we do to improve the act? Thanks for asking the question. We have to stop considering French as a majority language. It is a minority language in Canada.
So, at the present time, there is funding for Anglophone institutions in Quebec, and this accelerates the fact that the French language is losing ground. Now, Quebec, well, you have to consider that Quebec within Canada is a minority. That's the most important thing. We can do, everything we can do with our legislations. We can try to defend the French language, but it has a very precarious future. And I feel that you are contributing to its loss. Thank you. Ms. Tamilio, well, there might be a central agency which could coordinate and implement the Official Languages Act. That's an idea. Thank you. 20 seconds. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Gladue. The next questioner will be Mr. Marc Sarret, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister responsible for official languages. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, ladies. Thank you for being here. First of all, to Madame Tamilio, thank you so much for the work you're doing. I know it's difficult with volunteers. It's difficult to get the financing. I know what it's like in Nipissing West and other areas. There's a lot of work to be done. So my question is this. You talked earlier about provinces, which don't help the minorities very much. In our 2021 budget, we put millions of dollars into learning the second language into immersion schools, 100 million to secondary schools. What do you think we should do? What are your recommendations? With the federal money we have, what can we do to work with provinces more closely, especially Ontario in your case? So what can we do to work with provinces to make sure that education, which is a provincial jurisdiction, what can we do? Well, they're looking at education versus the community aspect. But money is money. You might offer more money, better financing. But my recommendation with respect to education would be to spend more money. Well, there are community organizations, and Heritage Canada gives them money as well. So, yes, if you look at the volunteer sector, we get $30,000 a year. So if we have projects, we have to ask for money for specific programs. So you've got the money, and we have 6 months to build something amazing for Francophones in the region. One may take the idea of these projects. Why not take these short-term projects and put it into a basic funding pool so that go to communities to promote the French language. No, thank you. I have only 15 seconds, but thank you for your work. And Ms. Alpin, in Ontario, we celebrate as well. I hope your thank you, Mr. Serret. Next questioner, Mr. Mario Beaulieu, a minute and a half. Well, the Société Saint-Jean-Baptiste was founded 190 years ago by Les Patriotes, and they existed in Ontario as well. But one section of the Official Languages Act deals with this. We're talking about Lord Dunton. My question is for Ms. Alpin. Thank you very much for having invited me to appear today. It's true that the Saint-Jean-Baptiste Society, or societies, there have been several Saint-Jean-Baptiste societies outside of Quebec, and they have defended French. It's true that we weren't invited to appear before, and it's a pleasure to appear today, even if we know the best way to ensure that the French language lives on in Quebec is through independence so that we can control our legislation and control our own country. Okay? But I'd like to congratulate you because the fight for French outside Quebec is a very important one, and we in our society, we support it. Thank you, Mr. Beaulieu. Thank you, Ms. Alpin. Ms. McPherson.
That's very, very fast, and I do want to follow up on the questions around immigration outside of Quebec. You pointed out how critical Francophone immigration is in Quebec, but can you imagine, and clearly you can, how important it is for communities outside of Quebec? How important it is for minority communities to welcome Francophone immigrants in large numbers enough to maintain the community's vitality. We had officials from Immigration Canada earlier who failed to admit their failure to meet those immigration targets. I'm just thinking, what Madame Alpin, what do we need to do to change that course, to change our current course on this?
Ben, je pense que dans votre question, vous y répondez vous-même. Vous avez tout à fait raison. Il faut absolument prioriser la langue française. Donc, il faut accueillir.
We have to welcome them in priority, but we have to put measures in place to integrate them.
Madame McPherson, on ne vous entend pas.
Mrs. McPherson, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I was on mute. I just wanted to say merci, and I'm sorry I'm not asking in French. It's unfortunate, but in Alberta, it was very difficult in the 70s to get French immersion language availabilities for people that were in school, and my parents weren't able to do that. So I'm glad my children are able to take French immersion.
Merci, Madame McPherson. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mrs. McPherson. Thank you to the witnesses, Mrs. Alpin, Mrs. Tamilio. I would like to thank you for your energy and the information that you've sent to us. If you believe there is information missing, if you didn't have a chance to share it with us, you can do it by sending it to the clerk. The clerk will share the information to all members of the committee. Mrs. Tamilio, I would just like to add something as the chair. If you see Arsenault, Grodin, in your area, I have to tell you, they're probably from my area, New Brunswick, so I hope you'll say hello to them. Thank you for this session, everyone. Thank you for your energy. It was really fantastic to hear you all. Thank you all. Thank you 100 times.
Merci aux témoins d'être restés avec nous.